Coming up in this video, I'm going to go into a new product you may have heard of. It's called contrast paints, and it's from Games Workshop. Welcome back to MiniJunkie, everyone. My name is Jarrett. Not too much preamble. Sorry I haven't made a video in a little while. I wanted to do a shout out real quick here to Goobertown Hobbies. Brent over there has been really kicking butt with his channel. It's been growing, and I felt like, I feel like he's kind of taken the Bob Ross crown, because I thought I kind of had that going on with my chill approach to these videos, but he's taken it over. He's way more chill than I am. So that just leaves me with, I'm guessing like dad jokes is going to be my niche as far as the hobby videos go. I can't even use like, chemistry lessons because he did that too. But recently he did a video on making your own version of contrast paints, so I recommend you check that out after, of course, watching this video. Now, when I picked up the contrast paints for this video, one of the guys by the till kind of admonished me a little bit about not buying a can of Gray Seer primer because you have to have that primer for these paints to work. And he's like, okay, you suit yourself, because I didn't want to buy any. But honestly, this stuff pretty much works over any good primer. That's what I found, and that's what I'm sticking to. Light colors, of course. And that brings us to the Nolzur's Marvelous Miniatures line, and its sister, the Deep Cuts line for Pathfinder, both made by Wizkids, and both have been featured on this channel before. Because they're fairly detailed and textured, and they have a white primer, they come with a white primer already. You've seen how I use inks to speed paint them. Contrast paints work very similarly, so I'm going to use those on a set of, in this case, it's going to be actually scenery from the range, and we're going to see how it works. So yeah, let's get right to it. So these aren't cheap necessarily, so I decided just to start with 3 pots to try them out, and I picked a few colors I thought would be useful. You can see here as well, I've started to test them out before showing you guys. And here's the stuff I'm going to be using them on. It's dungeon scenery. This is from Wizkids. It's their Deep Cuts line, which is basically the same thing as Nolzur's Marvelous Miniatures. I have a whole variety of stuff here. I'm not going to end up doing the Iron Maiden you see at the top. I just found, I just wasn't feeling like it. Here they are, here laid out. You want to paint these before assembling them, just so you can get to all the nooks and crannies. Having said that, there's one pack of like little bottles and knickknacks and things like that that I did go ahead and glue onto various shelves. In the end, it turns out you don't actually use all of these shelves. I'm not going to build them as modular, so I probably would have glued these on a little bit differently. Here you can see I've got them laid out, and I've been doing some tests on the woods and on the clear bottles as well using inks. So this is going to mix both contrast paints and inks, but I wanted to test them out before actually showing you how I went about it. So the first one I started with was Wildwood, and I figure, if you're going to buy these contrast paints, start with the ones that you're going to get the most use out of. I mean, this sounds so obvious, but there's certainly some really cool colors in there that would be fun to use, but maybe not have as many applications. Whereas when you're painting, just about anything in fantasy is going to have a wood component, whether it's the handles of weapons or whatever. So I went ahead and I'm applying this to the bookshelves, and you can see the stocks down there. And for the bookshelves, anything with bottles and books on it, etc., I decided to do the shelving first, like the wooden part, because it's very, very dark, and I think it would be very difficult to fix if I get it over, like if I've done the books or the bottles. If I get some of this dark wood on there, it's going to be hard to fix. But yeah, you guys have seen this before. You just blob on a bunch of it. I don't think you need quite as thick of a coat. The one thick coat thing is a little overdone. You need a coat that's going to sink into the recessed areas and leave a nice lighter shade on the outside. And what I've been doing here is trying to paint a full panel at a time. I didn't necessarily succeed at that in a few spots, and we'll see how that works out later on. But just going ahead using a fairly heavy-bodied brush, which, for GW, that could be like a shade brush, allows you to soak up a bit more of the liquid before applying it. What I found in comparison to the inks I've been using is this dries quite a bit slower. That's got its pros and cons. And it's runnier, so I would say it is going to pool more than the inks have been pooling on me. And if you've seen any of my recent videos, you know that I use these inks in a very, very similar capacity to how the contrast paints are used. yeah, again, here you can see I'm working around the bottles. There's one bottle where I've done a test and just applying it as neatly as possible. And just take your time and make your way through all the different shelves and whatnot. Probably filmed more examples of wood than strictly necessary, but this is a great color. I would say Wildwood is definitely, if you're going to invest in a few pots of this stuff, and a few is probably a lot considering the cost, Wildwood is a great choice. It just seems it's going to have a lot of applications. So now I'm going to go back to the inks that I use, just to mix things up a little bit with this set. My feeling here is that, well, as you can see, it's got less of a pooling and less liquidity to it, and it, you know, still stains and still darkens the crevices. I would say it's a little light just doing the brown over the white. So I would say potentially I could have done another coat after it dries. Again, the inks dry faster than contrast paint by far. So I could have waited and just done a second coat. As long as you do a complete coverage of a section, or in this case the whole table, and let that dry, and then do a complete coverage again, I think you're fine and you won't get any weird like overlap marks and excessive dark spots. If you only do half a panel, something like that, and then try to go back again, you're more likely to get those overlap spots that are not as nice looking. Wasn't sure what the best choice was for stone, so I decided Basilicanum Gray, which I think is in reference to a lot of their terrain sets, and so I assume this is meant to be for gray stone. At first, when it goes on, it was looking a lot more like black and white than gray, but I did find that once it dries, it does turn everything a nice shade of gray with some good shade, you know, darker shading to it. So again, this is a good color for terrain, for anything where you're going to have, you know, rocky aspects to it, or stone. I think this is a good color. Not quite as useful as the Wildwood, but a close second maybe. You'll probably notice some mold lines. The Deep Cuts and Nolzur's line are a little notorious for having mold lines, and I didn't clean them off these as much, A, because it's just a terrain set and I was wanting to do a quick job, and B, because I wasn't sure how the areas would take the contrast paint where I had if I scraped off the primer, so I didn't do that. Arguably the favorite paint of my toolbox is Sepia Ink from Vallejo Game Ink. I decided to try and apply that on here to show you what that wood grain looks like. I think it's got a nice oak pine kind of, I don't know my woods. But I think it looks nice. I think it's a good variation from the Wildwood, which was much darker. Again, you can see it goes on a little more, what's the word, like dry, not as wet and pooling. And unfortunately you can't see it too good on this from this angle. Same deal though, covering an entire panel at a time, so that later on when you come back you don't have to do overlapping marks, which is going to look, you know, overlapping layers, which isn't going to look good. It's harder to fix. That's the thing with contrast paints, I would say, and with inks, is it's harder to fix mistakes than with a regular paint where you literally can just paint right over it, because these are transparent. And of course I don't show it here, but if you're painting a set like this where you've got modular shelving, you want to make sure you paint enough of the shelves the same color as the basic bookshelf. Now we're going to try contrast Snakebite Leather, and this looks fantastic. I really like this shade. I decided this was like a leather tool bag laying on the table here, which I think is what it's supposed to be. This is really just a great looking leather color, and it brings back memories to the old Snakebite Leather, which was one of the colors from the old paint range. Looks pretty much exactly the same. Yeah, so just layered it right on, wicking up any of the pooling that's a little too heavy with the capillary action of the brush, and yeah, just let that dry. I didn't use this too many spots yet, but you'll see how I come back and use it later on for a different effect. In fact, each of the little spots and blotches on my fingers is roughly 75 cents worth of contrast paint. So coming back in with the Wildwood, and here you'll see what I mean about trying to go back over something I've already done and let dry. I have no idea why I didn't finish that inner panel there, but you can see that, well, let's be honest, I'm not trying very hard to match the two layers, and I'm overlapping quite a bit. But you can see that really creates a dark layer anywhere that it's overlapping. So any second coat is immediately going to create a much darker layer. So do complete sections at a time. And then if you want to come back for another layer, go for it, but just bear in mind that with any of these, it's going to create quite a bit more dark coverage and saturation and reduce the highlight effect. Remember, just because you're using contrast paints doesn't mean you have to do your entire project using them. So I've been mixing in inks, and now I'm going to use some GW Shade Wash. In this case, Seraphim Sepia, which I find is great for parchment style paper. These are going to be old wizard books, so they're all going to have that sort of beige colored paper rather than just bright white. So I just went around every book and just painted the, between the covers, so to speak. Obviously not being super neat about it here. So for the magic mirror for the wizards furniture, I decided to use Green Stuff World's Color Shift Metallics and using Psychotic Illusion. First I painted the mirrored area black and then put a gloss over it, because generally these color shifts work best over a gloss black undercoat. I don't know if this looked amazing the first time I tried it. This particular color shift wasn't showing up that well. I was probably being really impatient about how I applied it and putting it on a little too fast, too thick. I think generally it's better to layer this on in light coats. So after this one, I'm going to end up coming back with a different color shift over top of it. And that color shift is Emerald Getaway. I found this showed up a little bit better over top of the previous one. I don't know if you're really supposed to layer these on top of each other. And you can see it's looking a little speckly in the video, but once the final product is finished, it ended up looking pretty good. Here's a look at what I had so far. I ended up losing some footage after this, but what I did is I used some Vallejo inks in terms of purple, yellow, green, and blue, and I covered a variety of the book covers and some of the bottles just to create a variety of color before going in. And so you can see here's what they look like when that's done. And what I'm showing you is the finished. What I did is I actually glued these all together. I decided not to go with the modular effect because they're really hard to get in and out, and it was wrecking the paint. And then you want to look for all the little white spots where the contrast paint or ink is rubbing off, and go back over that with, I think I used the Wildwood to cover those little spots because it's a matte color. Prior to this step, I matte varnished everything because I want the metallic to show up with a little bit of shine to it. I'm using this Vallejo Metal Colors gunmetal because it's quite runny and thin because it's meant to be airbrushed, but as a consequence it's easy to brush on to anything that's got a texture to it, like chain, because it really runs into the crevices. And actually you can see here it's so runny it ran into the wood grain, but I end up coming back to fix that. So yeah, just going around to the various pieces, painting on metal handles, metal hinges, things like that. Very straightforward. Of course, in this case, also coming back to the tool pouch thing and painting in all the tools or pieces of the tools with that metallic paint as well. And lastly, the hinges and trim around the dungeon doors. With any of these steps, of course, take your time, be neat about it, because it's the contrast paints. Again, one of their downsides is it's going to be really, really hard to fix mistakes if you get paint onto them. Just due to the nature of how they work with the staining and whatnot. If you try to put more on top, it's going to create dark spots. If you try to paint it white and reprime it, this spot's going to just stand out. You'll be able to tell. So just take your time and be neat. Then again, this is just some terrain that I was doing relatively quickly, so I wasn't being hyper precise here. I haven't discovered any way of using contrast paints to do metals, so for the gold, I just used Retributor Armor. Really nice gold from GW, brushes on nicely. I didn't actually thin this, and I should have thinned it a little bit. This ended up being the only gold part that I used. This is the base of the crystal ball. By the way, I didn't show it, of course, but the crystal ball was done using Badger Minotaur Ghost Tint Plasma Fluid. That's another, it's kind of like an ink as well, in the sense that it was a tint. And I really like that sort of blue, but kind of almost mystic colored blue that it ended up. And then when I matte varnished, I actually masked off the crystal ball so that it wouldn't lose its luster. Speaking of which, because of the matte coat, some of the bottles did get a little dulled down, so I came back with Games Workshop Ard Coat, which is just essentially a gloss varnish, and just gloss varnished any of the glass bottles to bring back that shine. The magic mirror, you can see I masked off the shiny part before spraying matte because that matte varnish would wreck the color shift effect, and I also used Sepia Ink all over the frame and stand, but the final mirror effect itself looks really nice. Other things I want to mention, one is I used mithril silver, so any light color, silvery, metallic, and I went over carefully and did sort of a dry brush on any of the texture elements of the metals, like the chain, and I think some of the door hinges, the little rivets. And also I wanted to mention that with the book covers, any that I didn't do in a red or a blue or a purple, I used the snakebite leather contrast over all the covers. And because it was really hard to pick out each cover individually with the inks and do a neat job of it, so I just sloshed on the snakebite leather and it ended up looking really good. Because frankly, a lot of old books are going to have a leather wrapped cover anyway. And here's the finished set. Looking great for a wizard's dungeon or any kind of dungeon room that's going to involve libraries and mystical elements. Hope you dig the effect. I think it looks really good. That's it for this video. It's been a while since the last one, so thanks for your patience with that. If you're interested in this hobby, consider subscribing, liking, and even sharing the video. If you're interested in supporting the channel, maybe hit up the tip jar down below via PayPal, but if not, we'll just see you in the next video. Thanks.